Today, we're unpacking a chilling mystery that perfectly collides the modern, high-stakes pressure of digital content creation with a very real, very bloody 18th century royal betrayal. We're heading to Shaniwar Wada, which is this incredibly famous historic fort in Pune, India. But we aren't just looking at a dry history lesson today. No, we're exploring a fascinating account where the absolute desperation for internet clicks literally resurrects a centuries-old ghost. Kaka malavachva, uncle, save me. Now, these haunting last words echo all throughout our source material, instantly setting the high stakes for our investigation. Just imagine hearing a young boy scream that out into the dead of night. It's a cry of pure, absolute desperation. And as we'll see, it's the very foundation of a legend that absolutely refuses to die, specifically manifesting every single full moon.
Part 1. The Quest for Real Horror. So our story actually kicks off in a modern Mumbai office with a very modern problem. There's this YouTube channel called Scary Pumpkin, and they are seriously struggling to survive. The channel manager, VJ, realizes their progress has completely stalled out. Views are tanking, the pressure is mounting, and the audience feedback is crystal clear. People are just sick of purely fictional narration. They want real, dialogue-based horror. And it's this exact desperation to save the channel that prompts his writer, Vinita, to pack her bags and target Pune's infamous Shaniwar Wada. And get this, her timing couldn't be more dramatic. She plans this research trip for Purnima, the night of the full moon. You know, the exact time the fort's resident spirit is said to be most active. Moving on to Section 2, Secrets of Shaniwar Wada. Now, before we get into the paranormal stuff, you have to understand that this fort isn't just some old abandoned building. It was the absolute seat of power. Built by Peshwa Narayan Rao I, a legendary commander under the Maratha Empire, the Peshwas actually ruled from here for 85 years before the British eventually took over. But the most bizarre part of its timeline is right at the end. In 1828, a massive, unexplainable fire broke out. It burned continuously for 7 straight days, completely gutting much of the fort. And to this day, the cause of that devastating fire remains a total mystery. But you know what's really wild? The central figure of all this dark history isn't some hardened general or conqueror. He was just a kid, 18 years old. His name was Narayan Rao, a boy who suddenly inherited the massive weight of the Peshwa throne. According to the legend Vinita sound, it's his 18-year-old spirit crying out for help on the night of the full moon, doomed to wander the ruins because of a deadly, unthinkable betrayal. Which brings us to Section 3, entering the haunted fort. So armed with all this heavy history, Vinita and her colleague Shraddha arrive in Pune and step inside the beautifully preserved fort. But almost immediately, their investigative methods totally split. Vinita stays completely grounded. She's logical, interviewing tourists, chatting with locals, taking diligent notes, just focusing on getting the job done before sunset. Shraddha, though? Things get really uneasy for her really fast. Looking through her camera lens, she becomes almost hypnotized. She actually wanders away from Vinita, drifting deep into the older, burnt ruins, the exact sections destroyed by that mysterious 7-day fire. She stops interviewing entirely and literally just starts following shadows. And the horror builds incredibly fast here. Separated from Vinita, Shraddha starts experiencing these escalating anomalies that completely defy logic. First, she catches a shadowy figure through her camera lens. Then a hand clamps down on our shoulder, and it is physically unnaturally hot. She spins around, terrified, but it's just Vinita warning her not to wander off. But right after Vinita leaves again, Shraddha aims her camera at a stone wall and sees fresh blood dripping down the stones through the screen. Yet, when she lowers the camera, the wall is bone dry. And then, standing right where Vinita was just a moment ago, Shraddha sees a Maratha soldier glaring at her with glowing red eyes.
Section 4. A Vision of the Past.
Absolutely terrified by this red-eyed soldier, Shraddha stumbles backward in a total panic. She hits a wall, but it isn't a solid wall at all. It's actually a secret door. She tumbles backward into a hidden room, and the heavy door seals shut right behind her, plunging her into pitch-black darkness. So while Shraddha is trapped in these secret corridors, frantically screaming, "Vinita, where are you? Please help me!" a very different kind of panic is unfolding outside. Vinita realizes Shraddha is missing. The sun goes down, phone calls aren't going through, and the fort guards are aggressively ushering out the last tourists, completely locking down the entire fort for the night. What happens to Shraddha next inside that locked room is what you'd call a time slip. Basically, the terrifying darkness suddenly fades away,
And she is no longer standing in an empty, ruined room. She's looking right at an 18-year-old boy dressed in the royal attire of a Maratha soldier, who is deep in conversation with an older man named Raghoba. The past is quite literally playing out right in front of her eyes in real time. Let's unpack Section 5, the Peshwa's dark betrayal.
At this point, Shraddha isn't just researching a YouTube story anymore. She is a silent, paralyzed witness to the exact historical assassination that birthed the legend of Shaniwar Wada. The sinister setup is pretty clear when you look at their motivations. You've got Raghuba, the uncle, who deeply resents that his young nephew got the Peshwa throne and wants it for himself, so he organizes a fake, late-night assembly. On the other side, you have Narayan Rao. He's incredibly insecure about ruling an empire at just 18, so he goes to his uncle seeking guidance, totally vulnerable. Raghuba exploits this perfectly, trapping the young Peshwa in his own chambers just as armed assassins burst in.
And here is the ultimate betrayal. As the assassins lunge, Narayan Rao screams out, "Kaka, Malavachwa! Uncle, save me!" Raghoba responds with, "I am coming, Narayan." He pretends to answer his nephew's frantic cry for help, steps forward, and then, in a devastating twist, pulls a dagger from his own waist and stabs his nephew directly in the stomach. Bleeding out in pure agony on the floor, Narayan Rao looks up at his treacherous uncle and delivers this chilling final curse. "You killed me for this Peshwa, but after me, no one will sit on the throne." And with those final words, he dies. He seals the dark fate of the Peshwa dynasty, creating the very curse that many believe led to the fort's downfall, and ultimately that massive, unexplainable fire years later.
Section 6. Telling the ghost's truth.
Snap back to the present. The vision abruptly ends, leaving Shraddha paralyzed in the dark once again. But then, she feels a hand on her shoulder for a second time. She turns around, desperately hoping it's Vinita. Instead, standing right in front of her is the ghostly spirit of Narayan Rao himself. And he gives her this chilling mandate. Now that you know the whole truth, you must tell it to the people. He demands his true story of betrayal be shared with the world, and then he just vanishes into thin air.
So, moving out of that hushed midnight horror and back into the practical daylight of modern content creation. The next morning, a frantic Vinita, who literally spent the entire night waiting outside the locked gates, finally finds Shraddha lying completely unconscious in the deepest corner of the ruins. Once she wakes up, a terrified Shraddha recounts every single detail of that horrific time slip. Vinita meticulously writes down the true story of the betrayal, and back in Mumbai, Vijay animates this exact encounter for the Scary Pumpkin channel. And you know what? That terrifying ordeal actually paid off. By giving their audience the real dialogue-based horror they were begging for and fulfilling the ghost's mandate to tell his true story, their viewership absolutely skyrocketed compared to their old fictional stuff. They made their channel wildly successful again. But that leaves us with one final, really provocative question. Sure, Vinita and Shraddha got their clicks and saved their channel, but at what cost? Is the ghost of Narayan Rao finally at peace because his truth was broadcast to the world? Or does his cry for help still echo in those burnt ruins every single full moon? It kind of makes you wonder, when we did up the dark secrets of the past for our own modern gain, who's really using who? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next deep dive.